Alright, we're done messing around. Who gives a shit about some dead gods to dead people? The Catholics won. They're the world's only religion. Huh? Oh, Islam's still a thing? I thought we crusaded the bitches. Whatever. Let's discuss the fall of the Mayans and their conquest by Alvarado. So, the Yucatan Peninsula is a small region in the south of modern-day Mexico. And fun fact, the Yucatan was once thought to be an island, as the peninsula comprises mostly of flatlands until the very south, where the mountains form, and if you are coming from the sea, it is difficult to spot land until you are quite close to the peninsula. Sometimes dangerously close. Twice that, as the shore has loads of rough points and rocks that can fuck ship sideways. But there is also a abundance of mud, so if you shipwreck your boat, you'll be fine, but your boat will be ready for the grave. Yes, I am dodging talking about the Spanish conquest for now. You got a problem with that? Losers. This is my video. I control the narrative. I'll say whatever the hell I want. Afonso Henriques had a sexual relationship with your mother. We'll get to the conquest, but I want to give you as much context as I can on the Mayans first. So, another noteworthy thing is that the Yucatan Peninsula is quite hot and humid. I know, shocker. Central American climate is Central American. The Yucatan Peninsula has been called many names throughout the years. One was Petén, which means island. Again, clever Europeans thinking a peninsula is an island. There is also the native Mayan name, which I am definitely about to butcher, Urumil Kuz Yatel. This translates to the land of the turkey and the deer. That does sound delicious. In this region that the Mayan civilization grew, building great temples to their gods and producing art. Nacbe being the earliest Maya city that is well documented, with large structures being dated back to 750 BC until roughly the 9th century, while the largest Mayan city, El Mirador, lasted from around 1000 BC to the 9th century as well. Listen, I'm partially wrong here, but my source is using American dating systems, while I only understand BC and AC. But the point is, the cities were abandoned around the same time. The city of El Mirador was around 26 kilometers wide, and there have been found several thousand buildings of all varieties and heights, some ranging all the way to 72 meters high. But you've been noticing something. The two cities I mentioned were all abandoned at roughly the same time period. And if you're a nerd, you know the same is true for many other cities. That's because the Mayan civilization, as the Spanish found them, was a shadow. Just like we don't know how the Mayan society began, we also don't know how it collapsed. But we can make some assumptions. Similarly to the Aztecs, Mayan society was divided into city-states. There was no grand kingdom or unifying empire, and so power struggles existed. For example, Cancun was a prosperous city-state sitting on a strategic position that got nearly wiped out in the year 800. The royal family and members of the nobility were butchered and buried in mass graves. One such grave apparently had 38 bodies. This level of violence was common in the peninsula, just to be clear, but this was a part of a massive pattern that lasted for hundreds of years, and little by little, temples stopped being built, scribes stopped working, and their society would collapse. We know that this collapse began in Petex Batun and spread north from there. You can even see hints of this collapse in their architecture. The city of Bonampak, for example, has an unfinished mural depicting a victorious battle, but it's unfinished because work on it began in 791. You can see that beyond the mural, The rest of it is just sketches by the artist, or straight up doesn't exist. Yax Chiron, which I'm definitely mispronouncing, has unfinished monuments. Aguateca has unfinished temples. What happened here, in these places? These buildings and artworks aren't finished in the sense that someone came by and purposefully ruined them. It's as if the workers just dropped their tools and left. There is a reason for that. Societies don't just end, and in a sense they didn't. The Mayans survived long enough until the Spanish came about, and they still had cities. But in the span of 100 years, the large, vibrant civilization with massive cities was reduced to a mere shadow. Why? I don't fucking know. Palenque, Copan, Tikal, Karakmul were all great urban Mayan centers, and each one was abandoned at roughly the same time. But don't sour on me yet, little Timmy. We can theorize about their collapse. There is evidence that the Mayans in the southern lowlands were being invaded by a different people, a race of evil, devious, and horrifying normal human beings who called themselves the Toltecs. Maybe in the 9th century the Toltecs invaded, and in the span of 100 years managed to kill and force hundreds of cities in the south to be abandoned. With the arrival of the barbarians in Europe, the Western Roman Empire collapsed, but it didn't end. The Eastern Roman Empire continued, prospered, and even partially reconquered its lost western territories. And even before that, the residents of the Western Roman Empire continued mostly as they had before. There wasn't that much of a population decline, and the same is true just about anywhere else. An invading army conquers land, they might brutalize the natives, but by and large, no culture gets wiped out. By and large, okay? So, did the Toltecs exterminate the Mayans? Maybe, but it would have been impossible to kill all of them. So that still doesn't answer our question of where did the population go. Teotihuacan. Again, I'm butchering it, whatever. In the 9th century, my glorious ancestors were committing brutal atrocities that I will glorify. But another less important matters, Teotihuacan in the 9th century was a massive city. It's unclear if it was the center of an empire or not, but its influence in Mesoamerica is far-reaching, and it did in fact reach the Yucatan Peninsula, and it did so through trade. But the city fell sometime in the 500s. Internal rebellions, droughts, we don't know. It's unclear. We're talking about very early history in a region that has had nearly no surviving records. It's like asking what was Alexander the Great's 500th breakfast. I like to think it was male dick. And the lack of trade from unpronounceable city undoubtedly would have severely impacted the economies of the Yucatan. But that alone cannot collapse a civilization. I mean, did the blockades of the Suez Canal in 2021 collapse the Western civilization? No, but it would have been hilarious. So again, the fall of Teotihuacan definitely impacted the economies of the Yucatan and high and lowlands. But that is not what caused the collapse. There are some people who also talk about a drought theory. Internal unrest as established systems failed to keep the populace under control, or climate change, which True Social tells me is fake. In the end of the day, the fall of the Mayan civilization is a mystery. A mystery that I do believe will be untangled, but for now, a lot of the historians' best guesses, and frankly mine, is that what caused the collapse was a mix of everything. Wars, lack of trade, severe droughts, epidemics breaking out, and internal unrest. In the span of 100 years, those events, if not happening all at once, would be sufficient in causing entire cities to be abandoned. There was an interesting bit of research done in the Copan Valley which used a technique called obsidian hydration dating, I am pretending I know what that is, and that technique was able to semi-accurately map the growth of settlements in the area and give us an estimate on the population count. And it tells us quite a bit on how the collapse went about, if proven accurate someday. In the year 400 to 450, the area had a peak of 28,000 inhabitants. In the 800s, it fell to 15,000, and by 1200, it was below 1,000. The Mayan civilization did not die, however. It kept going, and regrew and prospered. Not to the same scale, mind you, but they recovered. Just enough for Pedro Alvarado to march on them. And yes, I'm about to dodge the cool brutal conquest to tell you about today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends, and also Mayan culture. I do feel it's important to talk about who the Mayans were before we get to that. The conquest. Because to everyone, we know them basically as the guys in the tropical woods who built the pyramids with steps and the owners of that calendar who said we'd all die in 2012. Sounds more fun than our current dystopia, though. The Maya political system never fully developed into a single unifying empire or confederation, like I said. They had dozens of city-states or chiefdoms spread around the Yucatan Peninsula. However, early on they developed a sort of pseudo-theocracy, with their kings serving sort of as religious figures and authority figures, and they filled government seats with royal individuals most often, not family members. Beyond that, politically pre-contact Yucatan was as expected in terms of geopolitics. Some cities ruled themselves, others were strong enough to rule themselves and other cities, while others formed alliances. Warfare was also very prevalent in Mayan society, as rulers often took warriors and other people as prisoners to be sacrificed as means of legitimizing themselves to their people and their gods. We don't know how they conducted their warfare, but it is suspected that warfare was mostly fought between the ruling class, but commoners would also often fight in battles as well. They'd kidnap each other's royal family, burn down some buildings to flex on the defeated, and go home, with a turn towards outright destruction near the time of their collapse. But recent studies have, of course, cast some doubts on that, particularly at Laguna Ecnab in northern Guatemala, next to the ruins of the Mayan city of Huitzna, where upon examining the layers of sediment at the lake, researchers found a layer of about 1.2 inches of thick chunks of charcoal. At first this seemed normal, until a team of researchers explored the close-by Mayan city and found that the buildings were intentionally burned. They also found the real name of Huitzna. It's Baram Joel. Fantastic series for me to do because I can't pronounce any of the names properly. And upon contacting a different team of researchers who had access to surviving Mayan records in the form of the Naranjo monument, they found out that on May 21st of 697, Baram Joel was burned down. And not just Baram. The Naranjo monument mentions at least 3 other cities which were burned. And of course, since then, thick layers of charcoal, which were carbon dated to the time of the burnings, long before the Mayan collapse. So warfare may have been a contained and small-scale affair, but on some occasions at least, total war was a valid method. Acts of cruelty, whether it be against the rulers or civilians, on some level was accepted. This is accentuated by the fact that Mayan rulers were expected to be expert fighters, and are often depicted with trophies they won in battle hanging from their belts. And if a king were to suffer defeat, they would allegedly be tortured. Blood generally was a big part of Mayan culture, as it was seen as a source of nourishment for their evil gods. Sacrifices were usually done with high-ranking prisoners, with kings being the most valuable ones to sacrifice. Mayans would also apparently, on a regular basis, cut themselves to extract blood on their ears, their torso, their cheeks, their penis. Huh? Wait, what? Okay, this book, the stories of people in civilization, like Mesoamerica, ancient origins, says this. And I'm struggling to believe that last part. This book I'm using, partially is one of my sources, just flat out states that. There's also no source, there's no reference, there's no indication of where that claim comes from. And I went on the internet to find something, and I found two more sites, one being Wikipedia saying the same shit, but the Portuguese Wikipedia page also states that Montezuma surrendered his kingdom to Hernan Cortes because he was a religious pussy. So, I don't know, I guess I'm just an idiot? To be specific, they allegedly pierced their private parts in addition to cutting it. Ouch. And to make it even more believable, they would, on occasion, sacrifice his children. Again, these are my historian credentials. So honestly, look it up if you're curious. Lunatics. To make it even more believable, after the person in question would be sacrificed, the body would be thrown down the steps, skinned all the way down to their feet and hands, and the head priest would then wear the skin and apparently consume the body during a ceremony. I find that a bit hard to believe. That seems very fitting for any Spanish conquistador who wants some glory, doesn't it? Honestly, human sacrifices did happen, and human cruelty and stupidity knows absolutely no bounds. But this, it's very fucking hard to believe. I could be just saying stupid things right now, so if anyone knows more about this, please let me know in the comments. You'll get free feedback if you do. Their society was also divided between the elites and the commoners, and over time, as the population grew, they may have developed a middle class of lower-ranking priests, soldiers, artisans, and merchants. Kings, as mentioned, held absolute power, and were seen as mirrors between the mortal world and the divine one. Their governments were hierarchical, and the commoners, as is typical, made up over 90% of the population. Their buildings were not very durable by design, and in fact there is very little information out there about what the commoners' lives looked like. We do know that they fought in battles and could climb the social ladder by proving themselves as great warriors. Other than that, they would engage in agriculture, farming cacao and cotton for noble use, and planting crops for themselves. It is possible that if commoners proved themselves worthy, they could become influential members of society. I specifically found this on the commoners on this website. At the bottom of society sat commoners and slaves, subject to the rule of the nobles and priests. Commoners spent their days as farmers, architects, stonecutters, and carpenters, laboring to support not only themselves, but also those above them. Mayan architectural splendor can be credited to the commoners. The prevalent use of slaves emerged during the post-classic era of the Maya. Slaves included prisoners of war, orphans, the children of those already enslaved, and those caught stealing. As law and custom allowed for the possible redemption or paid release of a slave, the length of one's servitude was not necessarily for life. In general, however, slaves were at the mercy of their owners, and were considered too lowly to be given a place in society's class rank. In conclusion, the Mayans were a hyper-complex society with genuinely impressive achievements. Some of them I haven't mentioned, like the fact they had the most complex writing system in Mesoamerica. Yes, they inherited from others, but they made it complex. And even after their collapse, they rebuilt what they lost. They lived, they prospered, until strange men came riding from the north, which, despite their best efforts, the Mayan people would endure to this very day.